Welcome back to Danny Rants. Today we're in a different location, same studio, but different location. We are in Sydney. And across from me is 24karat Kev. We've known each other for quite a while. Again, like I always do, I'm not going to give you the wrap up. Can you explain to my guests who exactly are you in, I guess, the Australian music scene?
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm still not really sure. But yeah, still wearing a couple of hats. So I'm in A&R at Warner Music Australia. I'm a manager of a couple of acts, 6 acts actually, that I manage or co-manage. And yeah, how I got started in the music industry was just being a journalist, being a personality, you know, writing articles. And when articles started fading out, doing a lot of video interviews with a lot of the prominent rappers in Australia. Hip hop has always kind of been my specialty. And yeah, I guess just being a front-facing guy that hangs around and says his opinion, and for some reason people listen. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
But you're also like uniquely one of the only guys who's, you know, a journalist whose face is recognized in a sense. Like obviously you've done MTV and you've done a whole bunch of other stuff and you've
Yep.
interviewed some massive artists, which we'll go into no doubt later down the track. But it's like, how was that journey into the music industry from a journalist perspective where, you know, most people are like either musicians or promoters or whatnot, and that's how they sort of fall into it. Like, how was your journey into the music industry to the part you play now as a journalist? Was it different than others?
Yeah, I think it was a very intentional thing that when I started in journalism, this was the early 2010s. So this was when Instagram was just starting to become a real thing, you know what I mean? So I think from the very start, I was very intentional about having a very distinct writing style, having a very distinct lane that I was operating in, which has changed over the years. You know, at the start, early 2010s, it was the festival culture, you know, it was Stereosonic, Park Life, Future Music, all those sort of festivals. So I was covering a lot of festivals and I was really working on having my own voice and my own style of reviewing stuff. Like, so for example, if I reviewed like a festival, I'd talk about, you know, the food, getting in there, the punters. It was more of a very casual kind of style. Whereas in university, when I did journalism, they taught you to be, you know, impartial, focus on the facts, do this. And I was like, I'm just not going to do any of that. You know what I mean? And I think it was definitely the rise of, you know, blog culture and social media around that time, which I really latched onto. So from the very start, I was very intentional about putting my face out there and attaching it to a style of writing that not many people were doing at the time. So like the biggest compliment someone could have given me back then was, oh, I read this review and I knew it was you before I even read your name on it.
Yeah,
you know, that was the one thing where if someone said that, I was like, all right, I've fucking done my job. You know what I mean? So I think from the very start, I was very intentional about that. And I think that's why I was able to form like a lot of relationships, close personal relationships with artists, which eventually led to management because I was really putting myself out there as much as I could, you know?
And did you do university to get there, or did you sort of just wing it with that blog culture sort of uprise?
So I did 2 degrees at uni, actually. I did law and public relations at the same time.
Oh,
so that's
shit.
like a 5-year degree when you do it concurrently. And one of the electives when you do public relations is journalism. So I only had did 6 months of classes of journalism, and that's all I did. But yeah, that's what I was saying. It was never really done with the objective of having a job, you know what I mean? Because I've always been really good at writing, since I was a kid. So I had a Tumblr page. Like a lot of viewers out there probably don't even know what Tumblr is, but yeah, it was just basically a DIY social media kind of thing for anyone who doesn't know.
Every emo would know.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like, you know, the big thing back then. So I had a Tumblr where I didn't even repost pictures. I posted reviews of songs, of rap songs, and I kind of used that just to leverage my way into getting freelance gigs just for tickets. So I wasn't even getting paid. I just had this Tumblr and I was just sending it to random editors because back then it was obviously before social media too. There was a lot of websites. So we're talking back when In The Mix was, you know, one of the biggest dance websites in the whole world, you know? So I was reviewing for them for a while, all the festivals and, you know, albums and singles and doing news and stuff. And, you know, a couple of like Acclaim, you know, we're talking about Andrew Montel before. So Acclaim, I used to write for them very early on, and a couple of other print magazines here and there. So just doing whatever I could just to get free tickets because I liked going to festivals and getting off head and like, you know what I mean? Just like, you know, when you're 21 years old and, you know, someone's like, do you want 4 tickets to Future Music to see Nero and Skrillex and I don't know, like, and The Prodigy? It's like, yeah, I do. You know?
Man, it's funny you say that because like when I talked, even myself, like my own journey, people are like, what got you into it? I'm like, you know, free drugs and I liked googs. Because I was like, literally, I was partying all the time, and then someone was like, you know, you can get free alcohol if you bring people, and you can do this and you can do that. So I was empowered by free tickets. Yeah, it's the same thing. So I'd love to think about how many people in our industry actually started because they just wanted like to be on the door list. Yeah, and that was the motivator for their workload at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky thing about music because everyone is into it because they were a fan before they were professional. You know what I mean?
All the good
Everyone
ones are.
Yeah, a lot of people get into this because, you know, they love going to shows, they love going to festivals, they love meeting people and stuff. And that was definitely what motivated me at the start. And it was just like, oh, I can get some free tickets and I can interview some people that I look up to. Sweet, I'll just do it. And the plan was always, you know, when I turned 25, 26, which would have been 2015, 2016, all right, we're going to sack it and you're going to use your degree that you used at uni and just become a law clerk or something. That was always the plan, you know? And then one thing led to another and it's 2024 and still at it somehow. So yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like you kind of progress. The interesting one you were talking about before, like you touched on like in the mix and, you know, Acclaim, and back then it's like, it was sort of not digital print. I guess it was digital print. But like back then, for people that don't know, there was forums too. Like forums were massively attached to them, and those websites were powered by conversation, and now all that stuff's gone. Like when did that fall off, and why do you reckon that fell off?
I think forums just got overtaken by social media. Like, just because I think, for example, in a forum, it was a bit more anonymous, which is, you know, some people will say that's a good thing or some people say that's a bad thing. But now if you want to have a discussion about something, you can click on that person's profile and see what they're all about.
True.
You know what I mean? So I can't really pinpoint when that fell down. But yeah, definitely, you know, in the mix forums, you know, Oz Hip Hop forums, even anyone's into hardcore, Broken Glass Online, Bridge 9 forums, those were all like very important to, you know, the development of communities and culture, I think.
Well, we had one in Melbourne. It was called the One Love Forum, and like that's how I found the first clubs that I fell in love with was from that. And it was like that powered the actual scene to progress. Like it was sort of like it was how the underground was created, but not just in our scene. That was like every scene, right? Yeah,
100%. Every scene had, you know, their own forums, and I think the anonymous, you know, element of it definitely helped because people were talking mad. People would say crazy stuff on those forums, you know what I mean? And you wouldn't really know who they were until you caught them at a show or this and that. So yeah, it was definitely like an interesting time when everything was a bit more kind of anonymous. Yeah.
I kind of miss it. Like as nostalgically as we're talking about, I remember again like seeing guys or something like that guy's 2 months, and you're like, oh, from that forum. They were kind of famous within their own community.
Yeah. And people were known by their usernames. It was weird. I guess people are still are nowadays, but obviously there's a face to it now. And you know, I guess there's still Reddit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's still going pretty strong. But yeah, definitely, I think people want to know. There's a lot more visibility needed today.
So then you pivot from the writing stuff into the more video type stuff. Is that because the writing stuff sort of started to slow down in the sense of like people weren't really engaging with it anymore?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, still nowadays, I think it would be mad if like, you know, more people were, I guess, attuned to reading longer articles and stuff, because, you know, that's always been my first love, my first true passion that I really turned into a career, you know, writing. Like I was literally like doing the stupidest articles. Like I was doing like, you know, 2,500 word essays on High Snobiety about Kanye West Devil in a New Dress and why that's the best song of all time. You know, stuff like that, which like was really kind of, I guess it was tapping into the culture on a deeper level. I really love doing all that stuff and like reviews and all the interviews and stuff. And yeah, I think it was around 2015, 2016, I noticed that like, you know, that shift was really starting to happen. I remember even in 2011, 2012, when we were doing video interviews, we interviewed Q, who was the guy who founded Worldstar Hip Hop, rest in peace. We did a video interview with him and everyone was like, whoa, crazy, you guys brought your own video gear. Like it was like a big deal that we're doing that. And then 5-6 years down the line, you know, everyone's doing it. And so that was like another thing I had to learn, that skill set, you know, to go from writing to doing video stuff. And I've always just been a natural talker, I guess. So I was like, oh yeah, it can't be that hard. And then just made the switch over, I guess. And then, yeah, that's when we started doing a lot of the kind of video interviews that people probably have seen me on the internet for. So 2018, 2019, it was like, you know, at first it was kind of that big, whatever people want to call it, underground Aussie rap kind of scene. So I was doing a lot of stuff with like Chillin' It, Nerve, Triple One, Shadow, all those boys. And then 2019, obviously like the drill thing. And then we did 1-4 and HP and kind of.
Oh, so it was like, there was still early days when you were sort of working with those guys in 2019, 2018.
Yeah, we did the first ever 1-4 interview.
And that was still, so that was when video was still sort of starting to blow up. It was like kind of the same time.
I think video was like people getting used to it.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely more towards, a couple of years before that. I think video really starting to become way more dominant. The
first time I saw you would have been that 1-4 interview you did, and then I sort of went backwards. Yeah, and so I went and looked at everything else you'd done prior. But it's something that I've not thought about. Like reflecting back on it, it's like, you know, I was the same. I used to sit there and read articles all the time from guys that would talk about 2,000 word essays on whatever. Yeah. And it was hard. Like you only got to see one part of the picture. Yeah. And then when it moved into the video stuff, you started to be able to see not only what these guys were singing about or what they were talking about, but in more depth. And now that's the only way I engage. Like if I want to find out what a song's about, I find it on TikTok and I hear someone talking about it in like a podcast, right?
Yeah. I think people are going to start feeling about, you know, physical magazines and stuff. They're going to start feeling the way that they feel about vinyl. You know what I mean? Like now there's a big fucking resurgence of vinyl and even cassettes, you know. People love that tangibility and that kind of nostalgic element to it. So I think, you know, like hard copy magazines with like really well thought out articles, really well executed photo shoots and stuff. Like I think that's going to make a comeback in the next couple of years, you know, just because we're so used to just the fast content.
But you reckon that'll be like sneaker collectors, like people like us that sort of buy that stuff, or you reckon it could be in
I think it could be I think it could be a wider thing. You know what I mean? I think nowadays, especially with like a lot of content, the one thing that I got really sick of in like the journalism thing was just like, well, obviously it started getting very clickbaity. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
and I think that's necessary to a degree. You know, obviously you
kinda have to.
you hook people in to a
Yeah.
certain degree, but it just got to a point where I think it was just like, you know, people were misrepresenting facts and things weren't being presented correctly just because they wanted more views and stuff. So that was one of the things that I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of a bit, you know what I mean? So that was one of the things that I got a bit disillusioned with, with kind of writing and stuff, because you could write the best thing ever and then someone else could just think of a better headline and just, you know what I mean? And could get more clicks or more views or whatever. So
It's literally a copy game. Like that's what it is.
yeah.
And for those that don't know what copy is, it's basically when you look at something in the article and it's whatever that catchphrase is or whatever that term is that makes you watch it is called copy. Like that's like the industry term for it.
Yeah.
When you were writing articles and stuff originally, was this like just a hobby on the side or were you getting paid? And if you were getting paid, how were you making money off that?
So at the very start, like I said, I was just doing it for tickets. Like, well, at first I was using it to build up my resume, and I got a pretty good resume. Like, got my brother's missus at the time. She was like a web developer. She did me up like a little portfolio, which was really nice of her. Shout out to Sarah. I haven't spoken to her in like 11 years. No, don't even know why I said that. Yeah. So build up my resume. Then I started just doing it for tickets. So this was the early 2010s, and then it would have been maybe 2013, 2014 that I got a part-time job as assistant music editor at a website. And the website was also part of the same parent company as Brown Cardigan. So that's how me and Brown Cardigan.
Actual?
Yeah, that's how me and Brown Cardigan first, like, because a lot of people know me from being on Brown Cardigan because there was photos of me just lying on cars shirtless and like doing stupid shit. And people were just like, oh, that was like another weird thing that happened. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
About Brown Cardigan.
Yeah, the Brown Cardigan stuff, like when you were doing all the weird stuff, like how did that come about? Was it like
Oh,
natural?
no, just because we knew each other from working together, and then they started following me on Instagram and they just saw all the dumb shit I was posting. Like, if anyone followed me on Instagram like 10 years ago, I was just posting outrageous stuff, just like wearing stupid outfits, doing dumb shit, just like that sort of thing. And then they just reposted it, and then a couple people knew me from that and stuff. So.
I actually didn't even know. I obviously know Brown Cardigan's been around for ages, but I wasn't aware. It's been like, what, 11, 12 years then?
Oh, yeah, it was way more rogue back then too.
Yeah. They've just been around forever.
Yeah.
So going back to that, so you get your first job at like a same kind of publishing company or publication company as Brown Cardigan.
Oh, it was the same parent company, so they were kind of their own thing, and then we were something else. So there was like music, fashion, and there's lifestyle, and then other, like there's a lot of things involved in the one company. So I was working there 2 days a week, part time, but then I was still finishing my degree. And then outside of there, I was working at Rebel Sport and G Star Raw. So I was working those, and then just doing that on the side. And like I said, I was just hustling to build my resume and stuff. And then eventually, like, it got to the point where, you know, I developed really good relationships with all the festival promoters and all the labels and all the publicists and stuff as well. So it started becoming a thing when, like, you know, rappers would fly over to Australia. You know, there's only like, maybe at that time there was maybe 2 or 3 publicists who were the main ones working with all the big rappers who were contracted to Sony Records or Warner Records or whatever, and they just hit me up straight away, you know, and then they'd be like, oh, this person's coming to town, all right, sweet, we're gonna call Kev, you know. So it didn't matter who I was writing for. Like, I would just place it with whatever magazine, like, because I was working there, but I was also freelancing because I was only doing 2 days a week there. So they would hit me up for the rap, and whoever was most suitable, whatever was the most suitable publication for that rapper, I'd just be like, oh, sweet, they hit me up for this. Do you guys want to run it?
And you'd sell it, or?
Yeah. Like, not much money though,
Yeah,
you know what I
I get you,
mean?
yeah,
Like, I was
yeah.
still working 2 retail jobs and studying and stuff. It was just like, like, it was just more like, it just started getting crazier and crazier. Because at the start, obviously, you're just doing, it was more like the labels were calling in favors because they'd have these really kind of young artists that they were trying to break, you know what I mean? And they were like, we're trying to get as much media coverage as possible. Kev, can you do us a solid and just interview this guy, put him on, rah. But then the good thing about that was you never knew who the fuck was going to blow up. So
True.
one of the ones I did was Post Malone, you know?
Wow,
So
really?
this was when he just dropped White Iverson. So he was supporting Diplo on like a massive lineup, but he was only the supporting act, you know. And then Universal, I had a friend there at the time, and they called me up and said, hey, we got this new guy called Post Malone. Maybe you've heard his song White Iverson. Do you want to come interview him? And we went down to Universal in Woolloomooloo, And I went in the office, and he was just the nicest dude ever. Like, you know what I mean? And then because he only had one song out at the time, he's still a nice guy now. Like, I've met him since then, but like, you know, he was just like young and, you know, really kind of excited that he was getting interviewed and stuff. And then I remember we finished the interview. We took a couple of photos of him. And then he was like, "What are you doing now?" And I was like, "Nothing. What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going down to the studio. We're just going to play some new music if you want to come down and hang out." So then we went to the studio, and then he did a shoey out of a construction boot for some reason. And then he's like, "Oh, this is a new song. It's going to come out soon. Yeah, I'm just waiting on one guest verse from it, from 21 Savage, but the song's called Rockstar." And he played it, and we were like the first people ever to hear it. And then comes out later that year, and it literally becomes the biggest fucking song in the world. You know what I mean?
Dude,
and then
that's sick.
Yeah, and then I've seen him since then, like at festivals and stuff. And then with the Speed thing, he was like, you know, he put Speed on the WWE soundtrack because he was curating it. And so it's just like a weird like thing that like, I guess I've interacted with him in kind of different capacities over the year. But that was a good example of like, you know, someone who was kind of up and coming at the time, and you interview him, and then 3 years later, you're like, what the fuck? How'd I get to do that?
Well, because he'd be like one of the biggest artists in the world now.
Yeah. Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. Because from like White Iverson, he was big, and then obviously he had...
But even then though, when he did White Iverson, there was a lot of like, you know, backlash. Like people didn't like it.
People were like, yeah, he's just one hit wonder, he's trash. Like,
I remember that song. I'm actually getting goosebumps thinking about it. I'm like, when I first heard it, I was like, this is a banger. And I could show it to my mates, and they're like, this sucks. I was like, dude, what do you mean? Like,
I think people were confused because he was just like a white dude with like long hair and like...
That album, dude, I listened to back to front. Like, I was just like, could not stop. And then everyone was like, it's auto-tune. I'm like, it's not that auto-tuning.
Yeah. But it was just, funny because it was, it's just one of those things that it's always good to, I feel it's always good to take opportunities because you never know where they're going to lead, you know? That, like doing that at the time, I could have easily been like, oh, I'm too busy, rah, rah, rah. I was like, no, I'll do it. You know, he seems cool. I like the song. Like, and then 3 years later, it's like, he releases Congratulations, Rockstar, fucking a million other songs that have all gone diamond or platinum, you know?
Yeah. So when if you see him now, does he still remember when you interviewed him?
Oh, last time I saw him, it would have been ages ago. It would have been before the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Okay. I ran into him backstage at the festival, and we said hi and chopped it up and stuff. Haven't seen him for years and years now, but maybe I'm not sure.
So he's someone that you interviewed before they blew up, but there was a lot of guys that you interviewed that were already blown up. They were massive. Yeah. Can you name some of those artists or people that you've interviewed that have been huge, like when they've come to Australia that, you know, are still huge now?
Yeah. Kendrick was one that I got at an interesting time. I interviewed him at when he just dropped Good Kid, Mad City.
Man, that's what an album, like unbelievable.
Yeah, like one of the best rap records, you know, period. So even then he was playing the Metro Theatre in Sydney, which is 1,200 capacity. So the tickets went on sale for that, and it sold out. Then he dropped the album, and that just obviously blew up. And then they moved it from the Metro Theatre to the Enmore Theatre, so they added 1,300 tickets on top.
Still not heaps, hey, considering how big that album was.
Exactly, yeah. So I think at that time he was kind of being heralded as like the next guy of the West Coast. You know what I mean? He wasn't really firmly established as that guy. Obviously he was huge, but nothing like what he is today. But yeah, so that one was another one. Like I had a friend who worked at Universal, and she was like, oh, we've got 3 slots for Kendrick Lamar. Do you want to interview him? And I was a massive fan of his EP, Section 80. So I was like, fuck yeah. So we went down to the Hilton Hotel on George Street. And I remember he came down to the hotel lobby, and I was like, oh, crazy. He was just like no security, nothing. Just him and his manager. And he was just wearing track pants. And then he's like, oh, it's a bit noisy down in the hotel lobby. Do you want to go up to my room? So I was like, sweet. So we like going up to like the 40th floor or something, just in this lift in silence. And I'm just like, because you're with Kendrick Lamar. It's like, what do you know what I mean? And
what do you say?
So it's me, the label rep. Actually, one of my friends came. She was in the area. She just came. And then his manager. And I remember we're getting up to level 17, 18, 19, and his manager just goes, I like your hat. And I was like, oh, thank fuck. It just like broke the ice. Fully broke the ice, you know what I mean? And then from there, it was really good. And then, we just did the interview. And then I remember at the end, I was like, oh, do you mind if I get a flick? And he's like, yeah, of course. And then something was like wrong with the switch for the blinds on the room. So his manager couldn't figure out how to open the blinds, and it was like too dark in the room. So then he had to like climb on the bed and turn on the lamp. It was doing all these crazy like photo angles and stuff to get the best angles. I'm like, oh no, it's all good. And he was like, no, we got to get the shot. And he's like, just now that I have like 20 photos of me and Kendrick Lamar in his hotel room, like on my phone, you know,
with all different angles.
Yeah. It was so weird, but it was so cool. And then, so that's another one. Like, obviously, when Good Kid dropped, it was a great record.
It's arguably one of the biggest hip hop records in the last 10 years.
Yeah. But he only toured like maybe 1 month or 2 months after that. So I think it was still kind of sinking in, you know what I mean?
It took a while because Triple J, I heard like Triple J sort of hear it at the start, and I sort of started to hear it there.
Yeah.
Back when you used to get music from Triple J, these days you don't. But it sort of started to fall backwards, and I was like, I remember the first song was Drink, and it took a while for me to understand it myself.
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I
yeah.
started flogging the album, and then became like, repeat for 6 months.
Exactly.
Me and
yeah.
everybody else in Australia.
Yeah, so I think like it was still only like, a few weeks old by the time he was touring Australia. So it hadn't really set in yet. And then it's one of those things that in 2-3 years time, you're like, holy fuck, I interviewed Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
and then actually interviewed him again after that. He had a deal with Reebok before his deal with Nike. So we had a plug at Reebok, the magazine I was working for at that time. And they're like, oh, can you interview Kendrick about his Reebok shoe? It was the one with red, one shoe said red on the back and one shoe said blue on the back. It was like a gang LA kind of unification type concept or something. But yeah, interviewed him over the phone for his Reebok. So that was 2 times I got to interview, like, arguably one of the greatest rappers of all time, you know?
Blown back up massively again right now.
Yeah, like now it's like you couldn't even, there's no way I could even know how to get an interview with him now. You know what I mean?
100%. Like he's doing the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so that was another crazy one. And then there's just been heaps, like, fucking, I don't know, everyone from DJ Khaled to a Model Technique when I was like 20 years old. Like
Model Technique, that's cool. That's like a one for the memory book sort of vibe, like the real heads.
Yeah, that one was really random because it was for a print magazine in Sydney. The girl that runs it, she actually is like the creative director of Marc Jacobs Heaven now. Like she does shoots with like literally Paris Hilton and Lil Uzi Vert or something, and she ran this little magazine in Sydney. This was in the early 2010s, and then she hit me up and was like, do you want to interview on Model Technique? And I was like, fuck yeah, because at that time, that was really the style of hip-hop that I was into, like hardcore East Coast hip-hop. That was my thing. And this was even before you had, I remember before you even had like calling overseas on WhatsApp or whatever. So I had to go to the newsagent and buy an international calling card for the US. And then I had to type in the code and then punch in his number, and then he just picked up the phone.
Yeah.
I remember I was at a club and it was 3 a.m. because of the time difference between New York and Sydney. So I had to call him at 3 a.m. So I remember I was at a club in King's Cross, took a cab home. There was no Uber back then. Took a cab home, and then was just talking to Immortal Technique. And my mom was upstairs being like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "You know what I mean?" It was just weird. And yeah, that was a really crazy one because he was someone I grew up listening to. You know what I mean? So that was cool. So there's been a lot of people.
How do you explain that to your mum?
Yeah. My mom still doesn't understand what I do.
Yeah.
She's like, why is there all these random shirtless pictures of you on the internet? And I was like, I don't know, just don't worry about it. But like for my mom, it's like, obviously, she's like a 65-year-old Chinese woman. There's no reference point. If I tell her I interviewed DJ Khaled, she's like, I don't know what that means.
Imagine if she turned to you and was like, another one.
Yeah. I think as long as, I'm not, I've got a roof over my head, I'm doing good, I'm not asking her for money, she's like, sweet, I'm just going to let him do whatever he wants. But the one thing that she did know was the Kim Kardashian thing. Like that was the only one that she had a reference point for where, she was talking to, her relatives or whatever being like, oh, Chris is interviewing this guy called Kim Kardashian. This girl called Kim Kardashian. Like, who's that? And they're like, my nieces and nephews would be like, what the fuck? Like, so that was, I think, the one moment where she actually realized, oh, he might actually be like doing something
good.
Like, yeah, good.
I kind of get that. Like even like me growing up, I remember like my nan would be like, oh, this is all good, but when are you going to get a real job? I was like, I'm making more money than my grandpa.
Yeah.
This is a real job. She's like, it's not though. I was like, I promise you it's a real job, but yeah.
I was having those convos till I was literally maybe 30 years old, and I'm 34 now. You know what I mean? So it was a long time, like over 10 years. It was like, all right, Kev, you had your fun. Can you actually put on a suit and tie now? Like I was having those conversations all the time, not just with my parents, with kind of everyone.
Yeah, same.
Like I think people didn't see the possibility that much back then, which I totally understand. It was a very much a shifting environment. The media, music, entertainment industry was rapidly shifting, and it's only really been in the past, maybe the past 10-ish kind of years where people have really seen, this flourish into a full profitable career path. Obviously there was before that, but I'm talking in the media kind of,
especially hip hop in Australia. Like you're working in hip hop in Australia.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
That's a relatively still now a niche thing. Yeah. Like, so to go, I want to be a hip hop journalist in Australia back in 2010 is like, even I would probably be like, come on, man.
Yeah, even the artists, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people get it twisted because they watch the rap music videos with like people wearing chains and with people wearing jackets and the cars, and I'm like, that's all rented or that's paid for by in advance, which is not a payment, it's a loan. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You have to pay all that money back. So I think a lot of people do get in their head about it. That's why I always tell young artists, like, don't worry about like what you're seeing on there, because a lot of it's like, it's not real.
It's not
you
true.
know?
Nah, it's like
not real.
full fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So the Kim Kardashian thing, like, how did that come about?
So that's another funny story. So basically, like I was saying, the magazine I was working for at the time, there was a music side and there was a fashion side and lifestyle. So the fashion team at the time they got it hit up by a publicist, and they were actually like, hey, Kim Kardashian's going to be doing an in-store appearance for a clothing line at Parramatta Westfield. So if people don't know, it's like a shopping center deep in West Sydney, the area, you know what I mean? So
To give people an example, it's like Werribee in Melbourne. Or
I
like
don't know what
Logan
that
in Brisbane.
So basically, they're like, can you do an article about this and just help us promote her appearance? And I was like, I think the fashion team just sent it to me because they couldn't be fucked doing it. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Bro, can you imagine Kim Kardashian in like a limo or whatever driving out to Parramatta?
Yeah. It's hectic.
She'd be like, this is mad.
Yeah. She was probably loving it. So basically what happened was, I did this article and was like, Kim Kardashian's going to be at Parramatta Westfield on this day, rah, rah, rah. I sent it back to the publicist and I said, hey, here's the article. If she's got any time on ground, just let us know. Just kind of talking shit. You know when you say, just let me know, it's kind of like just an off comment, you know what I mean?
100%.
I remember it was a Saturday. That happened on like a Tuesday, Wednesday. On the Saturday, my boss texted me on a Saturday morning, goes, have you checked your inbox? And I was like, why the fuck is she texting me on a weekend? Like, I don't want to do this. So I just checked my inbox and I had this email and it was like, hey, Chris, you've been approved for a 5-minute interview with Kim Kardashian. Please send through your questions for approval, rah, rah, rah. And I was like, holy fuck. So I jumped out of bed, just typed up a bunch of questions, sent it through to the publicist. And they're like, yeah, sweet. Come down to the Park Hyatt, which is the hotel that's just on the water, faces the bridge. It's like $2,000 a night, like crazy, crazy hotel, you know? So that was when she was coming out with Kanye West. He was doing the Yeezus tour. So this would have been 2014. She was coming out to do a clothing. Kanye was coming out to do the album tour.
So she was she was like peak still. Like she's sort of been peak for the last 10 years. But
Yeah. So I rocked up at the hotel and I remember that all these like little kids with signs saying, we love you, Kim, and we love you, Kanye, outside the hotel. Like, you know, like kind of like you see on TV shows or whatever when people are crowding outside the hotel. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? So then I walked up to the door and the security guard was like, because obviously I'm just dressed like the way I'm dressed. And he's like, stop. And I was like, no, I have this interview, pulled out the confirmation email. Then he led me to this other security guard, got metal detected, frisked everything, then went through another door into another room, got metal detected, frisked again, and then went into this room, right? And I'm sitting like literally on a chair like this. There's like a Kim Kardashian branded media wall here. And there's this table with all these like celery sticks and carrot sticks and macarons and like little cakes and shit. And I'm like, oh, mad. And then I'm sitting here and then there's like 7 publicists against the wall, you know, like obviously because when someone's as big as Kim Kardashian, there's probably going to be people trying to get their own viral moment or say something stupid or whatever. So there's like this line of publicists like ready to shut shit down if I tried anything to ask anything stupid, you know. And then I was sitting there and then like, 2 minutes later, she just like sat down and just like sat there, like literally sat like this. And I was like, hello. Yeah, and then we're just talking about this and that, talking about her fashion line. She was talking about how she has 3 Gucci visors back at home when she was a kid. And yeah, she was really polite. She was really, really polite. And then I remember at the end, I was like, oh, can I get a flick to post up? And she was like, yeah, of course. So she took a photo. My boss took a photo for me. And then the publicist took my phone off my boss. And then went next to Kim and they were like scrolling through the photos. She's like, delete that. I'll leave one. That one's good. Leave that one. And then she just walked off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Were you nervous?
So fucking nervous. I was so nervous just because it was like probably the one person who's like, that's like another level. You know, you can interview fucking rappers.
Well, Post Malone, when he starts White Iverson, is here.
Yeah.
And then he's here now. Kim Kardashian is still probably above him.
Yeah. She's arguably the most famous person in the world, you know?
Yeah.
So that was another weird thing. But that was like a mad interview.
Did it feel real?
Nah. I remember I walked out of there. It was like a fucking haze. It was like a fever dream. It was just like all the colors were different and stuff. You know what I mean? And then I went and seen Kanye West that night and she was in the crowd and stuff. And yeah, that was, I remember I loved that show. So yeah, that was funny. I did that one. And then I interviewed Khloe Kardashian about something else a couple of years later. And then more recently, like, you know, the Kourtney Kardashian was doing wearing the speed merch and stuff.
Yeah, I saw that,
because she was with Travis. So It's like this another weird connection with all three of the Kardashian sisters. I don't know. Like,
That's like probably a good transgression, right? So you're talking about Speed.
Yeah.
So Speed's one of the artists you manage a bunch of other ones too.
yeah.
I know for those that don't know that Kourtney Kardashian wore a Speed t-shirt at a Blink-182 concert or something to do with Travis. Is that
She's
right?
worn it heaps of times. Yeah, she gets paparazzi'd in it and like all that sort of stuff.
How'd she get it, you reckon?
Because Travis is a massive fan of Speed.
Yeah.
So Travis obviously plays in, one of the biggest pop punk bands of all time, Blink-182, plays in a bunch of other bands. But he's tapped into the hardcore scene, So when Speed, I remember when we went over to LA in 2020, last year, 2023, Jem from Speed did a podcast, and the guy that hosts the podcast is good mates with Travis. And he said, can I bring Travis down to the show tonight? So Travis just came to watch Speed play at Sound and Fury Festival in LA.
That's insane.
Yeah, and then after that, I think we just sent him a merch pack or something, you know what I mean? And every time, like, the boys are in town, like, he always comes down to the shows. Him and Kourtney both come down to the shows. And
I feel like I'd be so nervous. If Travis Barker came down to my show to watch me play, I don't know if I could play.
yeah, or I don't know.
huge.
I haven't been there those times. Like, well, I have been there, but, like, I haven't spoken to him or interacted with him because I don't want to be that guy, you know what I mean? But
Yeah, that's everyone like us backstage. I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
There's like these rules. And I'm like, I remember one time I was sitting next to, which I think you'll appreciate, but Justice.
yeah.
And I was like standing next to him. I was fully aware it was Justice. And every
Yeah.
part of my being wanted to be like, can I get a flick? But I
Yeah.
knew if I did, everyone would be like, why the fuck did you do that?
Yeah,
It's this
yeah.
weird unwritten law that you kind of have to act as cool as the people that you're standing next to.
Yeah. You don't want to be that guy. But yeah, he came down to the show, and then he's seen him a couple of times since, and he invites the boys to the Blink-182 shows in America and whenever he's in town. And yeah, so I think he's a big fan, and obviously all the boys and myself, like, we're huge fans of Travis Barker and all the projects he's done over the years since we were kids. So
He's
it's
the
a bit
guy.
of a trip out. Yeah.
So the artist you are working, that's where I was going with that. But I wasn't expecting you to tell me that Travis Barker comes and watches the shows. So it kind of threw me off.
Yeah.
But so the artist you are working, can you kind of give us an overview of who you're working with, kind of the genres? Because you work with different genres.
Yeah.
And then I guess some iconic moments. So, well, I'll probably, talk about the artist first, and then I'll ask that question back around.
Yeah, so I manage Shady Nicey, who are kind of post-punk, kind of like genre-bending rock group. Fuckhead, techno DJ.
I love that name.
Yeah, she's playing Boiler Room in December. Anyone who's going to Boiler Room, she'll be playing that. She just played with X Club, done a couple of her own headline shows this year as well. Man Young, who's this kind of more ambient folk kind of acoustic artist. He's based up on the Central Coast. He's playing with Matt Corby in a couple of weeks. And then Nerve, obviously, I think most people would know him, just like Brisbane MC, producer, mixer, master, engineer. Just did a song with DWE and Songa, which is pumping at the moment. And then Posse Shot, Melbourne
boys.
crew would know them.
Get the fucking money up.
Just loose cunts. And then Speed. Yeah, so all those artists, not all of them, most of them I co-manage. So I'll be doing it with someone else, and then a couple of them myself. And yeah, so it's busy roster. But yeah, I always like to keep things a bit mixed, you know what I mean? Because I think it just helps you grow as like a manager or as a human, you know what I mean? To be connecting with different communities, different audiences, seeing all the nuances between each genre, you know what I mean? How you behave in the hip hop scene is very different to how you might behave in the dance scene.
Definitely.
Versus, the hardcore scene, obviously that's totally different. So
It's interesting. It's interesting to me because like I also am a genre jumper when it comes to artists or even shows and whatnot. But you are maybe one of the only other guys I know who does it like at a kind of a grassroots level.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered like what's the challenges of working with so many different sort of genre typed artists. Like you're going to like Speed, who was sort of hardcore, and then you're dealing with techno, which couldn't be further apart. Or like, I guess in saying that maybe they are a little bit. But you know what I mean? Like, is there challenges, or do you see it as like managing artists is the same thing regardless of genre?
I think fundamentally it's the same thing, but like I said, I think there's just like different nuances that have to be appreciated when you're dealing with different scenes. Obviously, like each scene's got its own politics, you know what I mean? Like the dance scene, highly political.
Very, very,
You know
especially in
what I
Melbourne.
mean? The hip hop scene, that just comes naturally to me, as well. But for example, with like Man Young, he's like, that's a totally different space that I haven't really been involved in, like kind of that more down tempo, acoustic, indie pop, bit of older demographic, So I'm learning as I go, You know what I mean? And I'm co-managing with someone else as well. So we're all doing it together and we're all learning off each other, which I think is the most important thing in music. Like, I think if you stick with one genre, it can kind of stunt you a little bit because you get so used to stuff. And then, especially like you were saying in hip hop in Australia, it's quite small. So like within like a couple of years, you know everyone.
Yeah.
And you know how things work. And that's all well and good. But I think in order to grow and kind of really expand your opportunities, you know, it's good to kind of like, you know, obviously not just saying jump on whatever's hot, but like obviously you have to feel passionate about the artist and if it makes sense and it's a good, you feel confident you can do a good job while still learning the ropes. Why not? You know?
And there's a good point that you're saying, like when you do like hip hop, like there's maybe 20 people in it. Yeah. Like, and then you talk about dance, it's probably maybe 100, but it's still like, you're right. It's the same people. It's the same circles. Like if I go to a hip hop show, I'd see you, Wings. Like it was the same guys I'd see at the hip hop shows. If I go to a dance show, predominantly it's the same guys, depending on genre. Like that's where it's probably a little bit different. But if I go to like hard techno shows, hard techno guys are there. If I go to a house show, it's all the house guys are there. So you are right. Like that's a unique thing. That's probably not even just Australian, right? Like that's a worldwide thing. Like if you go to America, it's the same shit. If you go to Europe, New Zealand, whatever, it's like you're meeting all these people from all over the world pretty quickly because these genre groups aren't that big.
Yeah. And also with like, for example, Posse Shot are playing a show with Amel and the Sniffers this weekend.
I saw that, man. I actually wanted to go to that.
You know what I mean? So I think that, you know,
that's tomorrow night, right?
Yeah. I think artists nowadays, and I think fans as well, they're so more accustomed to like just cross-genre, cross-cultural moments happening. So I think like the more kind of touch points you can have just within, I guess, the broad, well, not even within music, just within, you know, entertainment or whatever you want to call it, you know, I think that's the better. Like, for example, like my big goal, you know, after this is to manage a pop artist. You know what I mean? Because I love pop music. Like people think I'm a hip hop guy or whatever. You literally look at my most played on Spotify and it's literally Sabrina Carpenter, Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish, Lana Del Rey, Tyler. You know what I mean? Like that's literally the shit I listen to when I'm at home. And I've always been like, I would love to manage a pop artist. You know what I mean? Because I feel like it's just like another challenge.
100.
I just think it's
arguably the hardest challenge in the world, but if it blows up, it's the biggest like,
reward.
Thing you do.
Yeah. I mean, if you're managing fucking Lana Del Rey, you'd be laughing.
It's interesting because, like, again, we're going to go into A&R stuff down the track, but it's like I remember taking a pop artist to like one of the labels I work with, and they were like almost like, "Don't worry about it," because it's like you're never gonna. It's not like don't worry about it, but they were like, it's so hard that genre to get into that. You know, you're probably better off spending your time dealing with hip hop in a sense. So it's an interesting one because people probably don't know that like that is, if you are going to make music and you're going to make pop music, it's probably the highest mountain to climb.
100% because it's so competitive. And I guess it also relies on kind of like the framework of the industry the most. You know what I mean? Something like speed can totally exist outside of the traditional industry framework.
And mainstream.
Yeah, whereas pop music kind of uses all those things like commercial radio or mainstream festival plays or just those traditional tiers of you know, success that, you know, music has been built on traditionally. A lot of people haven't been able to subvert that over the years, but I think pop music can, you know, you could put up a TikTok and it could blow the fuck up and you could climb that, but still, I think for the most part, still uses that, you know, to be a global pop star, you need to be pumped on commercial radio.
True. It's like you have to take those traditional sort of steps.
Yeah. So I think it's hard, but like it's a challenge that I want to do. So I'm just saying it now because I want to manifest it, you know?
Yeah, 100, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, you know, I would love to work on just a full-blown pop project. Like that's one of like my big dreams, yeah.
Man, I've got like a small one, which is like there's a venue called The Forum in Melbourne. And I've done like fucking every venue in Melbourne. Yeah. And I haven't done The Forum. So like my one, it's kind of small, but it's super realistic. But like I'm manifesting it now by saying it because you just mentioned it. But I want to do an artist that I manage and taken care of and started, and I want to sell out The Forum. Like it's something that's like I've always wanted to do. On that, iconic moments that you've had with your artist that you can talk on. Like, so what are some of the best, you know, moments that you've had with like say two of your artists that you sort of sat there and go, fuck, we did it.
Oh, that's a good question. Fuck, we did it. I don't know if obviously there's been like amazing moments. Like there's just like all the kind of stuff that people would say, like, I guess, you know, going platinum or, you know, like for example, like what I was talking about before, Nerve collaborating with DEE. That's fucking huge. You know what I mean? I guess there's all those sort of things, but I think the moment I say that I'm satisfied, I'm not saying I'm satisfied, but saying that, you know, like we did it, I'm going to take my foot off the gas.
I get it.
So I don't want to say it, but for sure, has there been moments, you know, 100%, you know, 111, record going platinum and touring and playing shows in Germany before we did a headline tour in Australia. That was crazy. You know, Nerve doing a song with DWE, like I said, that's huge. You know, Posse Shot selling out their first, you know, national tour. That was another one. Speed going overseas, like literally Asia, all around Australia, America, Europe. That's awesome too. You know, so there's definitely like, you know, I guess like milestones that we've reached. But I never want to say that like, yeah, like we did it, because job's not done yet, you know?
Yeah, totally. I get that. That's actually kind of good motivation, right? But
Yeah.
I'm much the same, but at the same time, I'm always like, I don't know, it's just more the goalpost change. So like when I get there, I'm like, you know, we got to get to 1 million streams or whatever. And then we do. And it's like, all I give a fuck about is that 1 million streams.
Yeah.
Then we get to 1 million streams. And then now I've got artists with multiple millions of streams and multiple songs with millions of streams. And I don't no longer care about it. I don't even look at it. Yeah. And like, so it's like, you kind of get there and then it moves on quickly. But yeah, take it. It's like saying we did it. It's a good thing to look at. Like if you say we did it, then you might stop.
Yeah, 100%. I remember Flex Mami was talking about this on one of her podcasts as well. She was saying that like, if you move the goalpost too quick, you'll never appreciate what you've done. And I think that's really important too. So it's always trying to find that balance of like, yeah, that was hectic. Okay, what are we doing next?
Yeah.
But not leaving a gap between those two statements. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Not just being like, that was hectic, what's the next thing? But like actually taking time to appreciate, yeah, like we did it. We did what we set out to do. Okay, like,
and it's
now
a
what
cool
else
feeling
can we
when you do that though. Like I made doing little things like Australian support tours with massive artists. And it's like you kind of do those runs where it's like, you know, hectic, you're moving every day, rah, rah. And then you spend that next 3 days reflecting like, fuck, how cool was that?
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, like, what's the point in a way? You know,
Yeah, 100%. I think with Triple One, like that was a huge one because that was the first group I ever managed. And then like I said, we did a tour to Germany before we did a headline tour in Australia. Just, I don't know how, like just happened. So we went over to Germany, and I remember we were playing in this old World War II bunker. It was like, there was no, like we had to carry all our shit to the green room, which was up this spiral staircase. We actually filmed the video for the song Bad Boy in there because we were like, this staircase is hectic. It's like a full like concrete, whatever sandstone building. We're like, what is this place? It's so weird. And then, you know, having 200 kids in there didn't speak English, just screaming out all the lyrics to these Australian rap songs. Like that was one moment. And it was my birthday that night too. I remember it was my 29th birthday that night. And I remember like they all sang happy birthday in like broken English. And that was one moment where I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like, how is this happening right now? You know what I mean? And then I remember this one guy came up to us, to Marty, who's in the group, and just handed him a pair of underpants. And Marty was like, oh, what's this for? And he goes, oh, I saw you on Instagram stories, because we were doing stupid Instagram stories in the Airbnb. He's like, I saw your Instagram stories. You had a hole in your underpants. So I thought I'd bring you a fresh pair because you're on tour and it's probably hard for you to buy a pair. And we're like, not sure if these are fresh, but like, whatever, we'll take them.
This is not guaranteed. You should have
Yeah. No, I think he did give him a little, I don't know. This is a long time ago. But again, that's one of those moments where it's like, wow, like, you know, the language barrier just didn't matter whatsoever. People were just there queuing up from fucking, you know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a show that started at 9 o'clock, you know? Like, that's just cool, like, to see, you know?
That's mad.
Yeah.
When 2018 comes, we've talked about this before, and you've just sort of discussed it earlier in this pod, but 1/4 comes out, they basically fucking take over Australian hip hop, they blow up. You're at the forefront of sort of interviewing these guys straight away. So like you're the first sort of, I guess, media to that scene or pay attention to it.
Yeah.
What was that like? You know, like, and for those that don't know, which surely everybody knows, but like that was kind of the rise of what you would call, it was gang kind of rap, realistically. Like I know it's drill is the term they use, but a lot of it was affiliated. There's people in jail. They were singing about jail. It was about gangs. It was about murders. Like literally some of the conversations they were singing about were murders. How was that? Firstly, what was the motivation for you to get so heavily involved in it so quickly? And then second to that, how was that kind of, I guess, rolling around in those circles, right? Some of these people were scary types. Like how was that?
I think like for me, it's like with music or with any interview that I do, like it's always about trying to find that commonality. You know what I'm saying? So when I was interviewing 1/4, it was like, okay, you guys are some young dudes on your drill thing from Mount Druitt. I'm like a late 20s Chinese man from Maroubra in the southeast. We could not be more apart in terms of who we are, but like, what's the common ground? So like, whenever I've done, you know, interviews, books, podcasts with anyone, it's always about exposing that side of the person that the audience might not know about. You know, they see one side of the music, but like, what do we actually, you know, trying to find, you know, the motivations for why people do what they do. You know, that's always been my goal as a journalist. You know what I'm saying? So when people say like, oh, you're interviewing people who have done bad shit, or you're interviewing this person and that person said this, I'm like, yeah, okay, they might have done some bad things in the past, but what are they doing now? Like, and what's the common ground here? That's always been my motivation as a journalist. You know what I'm saying? Like outside of even talking music boundaries, just everything. You know what I mean? That's always been my number one goal. So when people say like, oh yeah, you know, you're interviewing this rapper or this rapper or this rapper and this rapper, it's like a lot of the people, like you were saying, were dealing with a lot of like, incarceration, drug use, gang activity. They had a lot of stuff in their past. So my thing was kind of like, I guess finding a side of them that hadn't been shown before.
Yep.
And that's always been the goal.
Did it come?
And I also like the music, you know, like
Yeah,
I grew up on like, you know, listening to DMX, MOP, Mobb Deep, Capone Noriega. I grew up listening to hardcore hip hop. So that's another thing when people say, oh, you're not covering this artist or this artist. Like, yeah, have you seen what I grew up on?
Yeah.
Why the fuck would I be covering some weird ass fucking, I don't know, like type of hip hop? Like I don't like every type of hip hop. I just don't. You know, there's so many subgenres of hip hop. So like, yeah, like I think I've always gravitated towards that side of hip hop because that's I grew up on listening to hard hip hop. So like listening to drill, like having grown up on Chicago drill and later UK drill, that was very natural for me to listen to 1-4, you know. And even before that, like people were talking about that similar sort of lyrical stuff, even with the underground Sydney stuff that I was affiliated with in the start. So talking about, you know, your guys like Entar, Schemo, Forte, Cursor, all that, you know, that sort of stuff. So I feel like drill, as much as it was like a new thing, it definitely was built upon, you know, the Sydney street rap,
with the gutter rap
type stuff. Yeah.
So was it challenging kind of, I guess, getting in contact with these guys and then interviewing them? Was there any sort of problems with it or was it relatively easy?
No, that wasn't hard at all because their manager at the time, Ricky, so I used to work at a streetwear store in Surrey Hills, and one of the brands that was stocked there was called Sydney Romantics. And Ricky worked at Sydney Romantics. So when I worked at the store, Ricky would come in and he'd drop off stock and come chop it up and whatever. So this was before me and Ricky were even involved in music. You know, we were both just Asian streetwear dudes. And then a couple of years later down the line, Ricky's worked with Sampa the Great. Ricky's worked with the Kid Leroy. And then he starts managing 1-4. So late 2018, I remember he messaged me on Facebook Messenger and he said, hey, working with these new boys, check them out. And sent me a 1-4 video. And I think the song was Ready for War. I'm pretty sure that's what he sent me. And I listened to that. Then I actually profiled them in High Snobiety, which is like a international kind of music streetwear type thing. I did like a little thing on 1-4 in late 2018. And then started 2019, they were dropping the song Shanks and Shivs. I started a new magazine by that point. Hit up Ricky and I said, let's do it. And How was in the mix too. So obviously everyone knows Howie was heavily tied into the 1-4 story. Still to this day, but at that point was heavily involved too. So between me, Ricky, and How, we just kind of teed it up. And yeah, they were doing sessions at Sony Records, and I went down there, and you know, they were a bit quiet and a bit standoffish. I think just because they had no idea what was going on really at that time. Yeah. They were just some young kids who were making music, just got thrown in this studio in Sony Records, and we're like, what the fuck?
To be fair, though, I work with a lot of Pacific Islander rappers, and they're all pretty quiet. Like you see them in the film clips, and they're like, you know, sort of daunting and scary and whatnot. And then don't get me wrong, they are definitely daunting and scary, but when you speak to them like a normal human, they're just normally pretty shy, and like when you break the ice, they're fucking hilarious. Yeah,
I find that with a lot of rappers, they're quite shy in real life, but when they're on stage, they just become a different person. You know, that's the kind of channel for them for all their emotions and stuff. So definitely, yeah. I interviewed JMs and Lex that first day, but all the boys were in the studio. I remember I brought my friend because we were about to go to a party actually, and then they're like, drop by the studio. And I remember I walked in and it was just like 10 of them sitting there, and it's just me and one girl.
They always roll so deep.
yeah, just rolling deep at all times. So, yeah, that was cool.
Man, well, I can say that when that message, it was like 2018, when that came out, that was the first one I heard.
Yeah, 2019 that came out.
2019, and then I went backwards, but I was like, listened to like, you know, Cursor, Husky, Chillin' Out, all those guys. And I heard it and I was like, fuck, it was like electric. And like everything just went boom. Like that was the first kind of song that I saw. I could be wrong, but it like did 1 million plays on YouTube. And then it was like everyone was talking about it, and then it sort of blew up. Like they were exciting times. Like I dove headfirst in much the same as you did, but like I frothed it. Like it was fun. Like it was fun and new and exciting, and it's like probably my favorite new music genre that's kind of been around for like the last 6 years, I'd say.
Yeah, it was so exciting at the time. Like it's crazy to say it was 5 years ago, you know what I mean? But when that first started popping up, and then the reaction videos, and it was just going through social media so hard. And yeah, I remember when we put up our interview with 1/4, because the first one we did was actually a written article because we didn't even have video equipment back then. So I remember we did a written one, but even that was getting pumped on Facebook. I remember there was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shares on this one article, and we had just a couple of BTS photos. But I think it was the perfect time because that was after Shanks and Shivs, and then like 2 months or something after that article dropped, then the message came out. You know, so it was like the perfect sweet spot for us. Yeah.
And that was like the first one that kind of went into mainstream. Like, you know, some people were offended, some people were interested, some people loved it.
Yeah.
It kind of blew up so big that it was in the Herald Sun, it was on the news. Triple J was covering it. Vice was doing docos on it and whatnot. Talking about docos on it. It went to Netflix. They did a show with Netflix and you were one of the guys on it. Can you tell us how that kind of came about and what that process was like?
Yeah, so...
It's called 1/4, what's it called? 1/4...
Against All Odds.
Against All Odds. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's actually a mad ass doco on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a mad doco, hey.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, so that first magazine that I worked for that I was talking about, I was assistant music editor, and the head music editor, her name was Erin Moy, and she was the producer at Entropico who did the 1/4 doco. So after, you know, me and her worked together, I went and did my thing. She started her film company, and then obviously blew the fuck up, and then she was doing documentaries for Netflix. So she hit me up actually and was like, hey, we're doing this doco on 1/4. We'd love you to be in it because you've kind of been there since the start. And I was like, yeah, fucking oath. And then the director of the doco, Gabe, he actually did a couple of music videos with me when I was managing 111. So he did Show Off and Love Rose. I think 2 of the best fucking Australian hip hop music videos, period. Like he and me and him had worked together a relationship through that. So yeah, Erin hooked it up, and then Gabe hit me up and was like, hey, we want to film a couple of like, you know, like interview segments for the 1/4 doco. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, yeah, of course. And he was like, when do you want to film it? Like, do you want to film it in your house? And I was like, oh, I don't really want people to see inside my house, like on Netflix, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't like, that's a big deal. So then I was like, how about we just order at a Chinese restaurant? And he was like, yeah, why not? And I thought he meant he was going to get one in Chinatown because I live right next to Chinatown. So I thought he was going to get one. I was going to stroll down there. They ended up fucking getting one like literally an hour southwest of the city. So I had to get a $140 Uber down there. They comped it, don't worry. Yeah, so I got an Uber out there, and it was like this little Chinese restaurant, like kind of near Campbelltown. And then we just filmed it in there, and then I kind of forgot about it because, you know, obviously the process of making a documentary takes years and years. So I kind of did this interview, forgot about it, and then they just hit me up and was like, oh, by the way, it's announcing like next week. And I was like, what the fuck?
Your parts are like iconic too because like everything's like kind of relatively serious, and then you've got like the Coke and you're like
yeah, I was
it's
the
like,
comedic relief.
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah. I think it needed it because, yeah, it's a bit of a heavy doco, but, you know, it's good that they had like, I think it had a bit of everything in there, and I think it came out so good.
Yeah,
you know?
it was killer.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best docos I've seen Australian in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Another notable thing you've done is you were the author for the Spanian book.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so Spanian's old manager, he's like an old mate of mine. I remember he just texted me saying, this was when Spanian was like, he'd gotten out of jail.
Is that Nick you're talking about?
Sorry?
Is it Nick Loopy?
Loopy and Adit, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I think he was still half doing music, but was just, the social media stuff was starting to go really crazy for him.
Because what he would have been like 2019, 2020 sort of started to pop, right? Or before?
Yeah. But I think he was still kind of like doing songs and stuff, and just, yeah, again, like just purely out of like the music that I'm into. Like I was listening to his music and was seeing all the social media stuff. And then, yeah, I remember Adit hit me up and was kind of like, oh, I'm starting to manage Spanian. And I was like, cool. And again, just as an off comment, I was like, oh yeah, if you want to do a book, let me know. And he's like, yeah, sweet. And then like 3 months later, he's like, do you want to do a book? And I was like, oh, fuck. Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah, why not? So basically what we had to do was we had to write one chapter, which they were going to then take and pitch to all the publishers. And then if someone bit, then we're going to do it. So met up with Spanian at the studio. And then basically we put the phone on the table. And I said, all right, so we got to pick one chapter to write, but like, how about you tell me your whole life story so I know which part to kind of write into a chapter? And he goes, what, from when I was born? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, all right. And he literally just says his whole life story for 2 hours, uninterrupted. Just said his whole life story for literally, I was born in 1980, whatever. Like I was at this hospital up in fucking Camperdown, and then like literally said his whole fucking life. And then we got that transcribed. I went home, just picked like the chapter that or the little bit that I thought was the best. And then went back and met up with him again. Added all the detail, all the color, restructured stuff, and then we pitched it. Someone picked it up, and then we had to turn the book around in like 3 months. But also that was lockdowns then, so like I didn't have anything to do. So all I was doing was sitting at home, just fucking scrolling on my phone, doing this book, and then once a week we were going to the studio, meeting up in the studio. That was back when his studio was in Glebe. So I was literally just like going home studio, home studio, home studio, home studio. And we were just like having these sessions where he was just like deep diving into his life. And then we'd get someone else to transcribe it. And then I just, do my thing. Just add color and rearrange things and, make it more booky.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was like something you want to do more of? Like that would have been a cool experience, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is what I was telling people. Like, when I was doing the journalism stuff, I was never considered like a serious journalist, you know what I mean? Just because of the way that I wrote, it was very off the cuff and it was very jokey and stupid, you know what I mean? Like the whole thing was just fun. So I was never considered like a journalist. I was never in the journalist awards or anything like that. Like, yeah, I did write for some newspapers and stuff, but I was never considered amongst that circle, you know what I'm saying? So for someone to be like, do you want to write a book? I'm like, that wasn't even in my realm of possibility, you know what I'm saying? I never even thought of that as anything that would even cross my path, So to have that opportunity was super crazy, especially with someone whose profile was kind of really, by the time the book came out, it was fucking huge. It was on a current affair, you know what I mean? Like you have to be some sort of mainstream relevancy to be on a current affair, So it was just crazy. Yeah, it was wild.
And what was it like working with Spanian? I feel like I have to ask that question.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like he's really punctual and really articulate. You know what I mean? Like he knows he's there for a job and he just gets to the point straight away.
Well, he's one of the best storytellers in the last.
Yeah.
He's one of the best storytellers possibly ever in Australia.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone, like, no matter what anyone thinks about him, his star power is undeniable.
100%.
You know what I mean? He's just got that.
It.
Whatever it is, the X factor, whatever you want to call it, he's got that X factor, especially when it comes to storytelling. So for me, it was actually quite easy. To be honest, because we'd rock up and he'd be like, sweet, what are we doing today? I'd be like, all right, well, let's do 2003 to 2006. He'd be like, all right, sweet. 2003, I was here. And he'd just talk. You know what I'm saying? It's not like obviously I asked kind of prompting questions and asked more detail and stuff like that, but he's a fucking talker. You know what I mean? It's not like sometimes you interview other rappers and you'll be fucking getting fucking blood out of a stone. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So this one was the opposite, And of course, like we'd rock up the studio. Sometimes it was earlier than me. He's super punctual. You know what I mean? He'd be there if we're meeting up at 10 o'clock, he'd be there at 9:45 with a coffee. So
I see he's 115 kilos. This is a random ass question, but I have to ask it. How fucking big is he? Is he huge?
He's pretty big.
Because you see, he's so ripped in like he's 115 kilos. I'm like, he must be massive.
He's like, I don't want to. He's heaps taller than me.
Yeah.
He's like probably like 6'4", I don't know, 6'4", maybe something like that. Yeah, he's a big dude.
Yeah,
he's a
massive.
big dude. Yeah.
What's next for you?
What's next?
Yeah, what's next?
I don't know. Trying to manage that pop star. Like I'm still trying to find him or her. I would love to manage a pop star. Also, I'd love to work on something completely outside of music. I think. I think I've been working in music for like almost 15 years now. I think so. I think like just for the sake of just personal growth, I'd like to work in something maybe that's like adjacent to music, but not fully in music, whether that's kind of like fashion or like, I don't know, like alcohol or like something like that. Like, something that kind of runs parallel, but isn't completely within music. I think that would be cool because, I think I've worked in music for ages and I like other stuff too. I think what I was saying before with music being, everyone who works in music was a fan before they started, and I think sometimes it's like, when the hobby becomes like such a job, sometimes you need some time away to appreciate it as a fan again. You know what I'm saying? Like,
totally, man.
Yeah. So I'd love to do something kind of like outside of music so I could just go to a gig without worrying about networking or worrying about, oh my God, that stage setup is mad. Why don't we fucking do lighting like that? Like, because I feel like after a while you start analyzing everything through that lens. So I think being able to kind of enjoy music as a punter again, that would be sick too.
I can actually tell you from experience. So for someone who sort of stepped out 3-4 years ago, I do now. Like I go to more shows than I used to and I just enjoy them. And then now it's been 3 years and exactly what you said. All I want to do is get back into music, basically like running gigs and stuff again. I'm like, I miss it. Like, but I had a couple of gaps here and there, but I'm like, every time I leave, I've then realized a year or two years later how much I love it and I go back to it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because, you know, when you're in it, sometimes you're like, fuck this. It's the same with a 9 to 5 job. You're like, I don't want to get up. I don't want to go out. I don't want to do this gig. I can't be, I'm so sick of watching and doing these things that you need that break.
Yeah, 100%. I think like just, I think just like music, it's always going to be a part of like who I am and what I do and stuff. But I also think like, you know, I'm 34 years old. Like I need to get into like gardening and shit or like fucking crocheting. I don't know, dude. Like there's like, I feel like when the hobby becomes the job, it can kind of blur the lines a little bit. And sometimes you just need to take a more bird's eye view of things and just look at other stuff, you know?
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming down today, bro. I'm going to wrap it up there because I have to go to this Fireball Bubbler party out in Robin Hood or whatever area it's in. I think Bronte, is it?
Charing Cross.
Charing Cross, yeah. So I'm going to head out there. So before we wrap up, I have to thank my sponsors who keep the lights on. So the first one is Estello. So this T-shirt here, I'm going to give you one of these. So I'm going to send it out to you via your address. It's run by a couple of guys who are promoters in Melbourne. Wicked quality. Don't believe me, go buy it yourself. Second to that, AAA Digital. If you're looking to enhance your event, your festival, or your hospitality business, hit them up because they've got strategy for days and 100% that will double your results. And thirdly, my own brand, WPshots. I don't have a bottle here because I'm in Sydney and I didn't bring one on the plane. You can get that from Liquorland or First Choice or any good independent across Australia. So Kev, thanks so much for coming today, man. That was absolutely fucking unbelievable interview. And I appreciate it, man. You've lived a very colorful life and thank you for sharing it with me.
That's one way to put it. Thank you, bro.